Hey guys, Youngblood with you for your Should You Buy video on the new Aegis Saber Firebird. The Firebird, built on the chassis of the Raven, is more missile-focused version of the combat craft, coming in at $170 Warbond purchase, which comes with LTI. But Warbond does mean that you're adding new money into the game, or if you want to make a standard purchase using store credits, the price right now is $185. But instead of the normal 6-month insurance that you would typically get, this is going to come with 10 years because the Invictus launch week that's happening right now, which is basically as good as LTI. The Saber was long one of my favorite ships until it lost the third shield and a little bit of the agility was tuned down. And the Raven has been an extremely limited ship that's had a nice design that has attracted attention. So now having something built on the Saber Raven platform that you're now able to actually purchase, it's a chance to fly that design in something you can actually buy. The Firebird being introduced almost provides a similar dilemma that we saw when the Talon and the Talon Shrike were released, basically picking your bespoke loadout by the variant based on what they can do. Much like the Shrike being the missile variant of the Talon line, the Firebird drops 2 of the gun hardpoints in exchange for bringing 12 size 3 missiles along, leaving you just with 2 size 3 weapons for your actual guns, which are the Mantis Ballistic Gatling guns by default. So ammo is a concern there when that is your only gun option. Now, you can obviously change those out. It's not bespoke to the ship, but by default, that's the weaponry that you get. Since the Saber and the Raven are already a somewhat known quantity, I'm going to be spending a little bit less time breaking down what the Firebird is by itself, but instead we're going to compare the Saber, the Raven, and we'll go ahead and lump the Comet in there. But that's really just a skin with different weapons that was based on the original Saber. When we compare the sizes of the different Sabers, it's a little bit challenging considering the size information between the brochure, Urkel, and the other data mining sites don't seem to yield a real conclusive answer on much. But the most common thing that I'm seeing is that the Firebird and Raven are 26 meters long and 30 meters wide, compared to the Saber and the Comet, which are 24 meters by 26, which actually gives the traditional Saber a smaller footprint, and also harder to hit than the Raven and the Firebird, which honestly, if you would have told me that, I would have said was completely backwards. Now, you also have this thing where the traditional Saber has interesting wings and fins and things that spread out, so you might kind of argue the ability to hit it thing, but worth just calling out the general sizing. It also seems a bit unclear on height, partially because it's hard to know when the landing gear is being counted or not, but it definitely appears that the base Saber is about 1 meter taller, which I think we can attribute to the rear tail fins like you have on a traditional aircraft. Mass on all of them is pretty equal across the board, as is the hit point value for the ship at 23,000. They all share having 2 size 1 shields, 2 size 1 power plants, 2 size 1 coolers, and 1 size 1 quantum drive. The Firebird and the Raven are faster, with SCM speeds at 240 meters per second at max speed at 1400, while the Saber is at 206 SCM and 1235 at max speed, which is actually a meaningful speed difference for the Firebird over the base Saber. Yaw, pitch, and roll on the Firebird and Raven is 50, 42, and 160 versus 50, so that's the same as his 42. But the different one is the 145 for the base Saber. So the new bird has a better roll value than the older Saber does, which I assume would be attributed to the fact that the Firebird and the Raven have 2 additional maneuvering thrusters that the base Saber does not, giving you probably better ability up and down on the left and right side. The Saber and the Comet have larger fuel tanks, giving 612 quantum fuel compared to the 583 on the Firebird, and 135,000 hydrogen instead of 120,000 on the Firebird. Basically meaning you can go for longer in the traditional Saber, both in quantum and with hydrogen fuel outside of quantum travel. So what we're going to do now is look at weapons. But for the sake of simplicity, we're going to pull the Raven out of the conversation because it's an entirely different animal. And the Comet is going to go ahead and come out of the discussion as well, considering the changed guns and skins are all things that you can update in the game. It's nothing that has to do with the hardpoints. So we're really going to be looking at just the Firebird versus the Saber, because it's just a different story, like the Talons that we already discussed. You have one version that's focused on missiles and another version that's focused on guns. The base Saber has 4 size 3 hardpoints and comes with 4 size 3 missiles. The Firebird has only 2 size 3 hardpoints, so your hardpoints are cut in half, but brings 12 size 3 missiles, which is basically tripling the amount of missiles that you already had. So which of these you choose is probably based a little bit on how you play and what patch we're living in, since missile performance varies from God mode to Nerf darts. So how that pans out in the long term is a big TBD. If you prefer the ability to stay out and just fight for a long period of time without having that requirement to return back to base to rearm, then I would say the base Saber is a far better bet. Being able to load up with 4 hard points of energy weapons is invaluable for continual fighting. Or even if you're just supporting a larger operation, being able to mix and match more effectively still buys you more time because you can prioritize which type of weapons you're firing. And having the better fuel capacity also means that you can stay out for longer without refueling. However, if dogfighting is a challenge for you, or you're planning just to support your team's ops with missile locks and supporting fire, then the Firebird does that better without question. The higher speeds and the agility mean that you can lock and get into more favorable positions better, and being able to launch a salvo of up to 6 missiles at once is quite impressive, especially if you're in a position that allows the majority of those to land. It's a great deal of damage. My personal preference, as someone who doesn't like to rely on missiles, is obviously going to be the base Saber. But this is really dependent on the operation being run, your supporting cast, and your personal capabilities and preferences. Now, with clarity around the Firebird being a missile-focused ship, let's do a little comparison to the other missile-focused fighters in the game, with the Talon Shrike probably being the closest competition. But there are some outliers like the Gladiator and the Fury MX that we will include here since they were mentioned by CIG in the Q&A post. Of this group, the Fury MX is by far the most transportable ship with a size that allows it to fit into a great deal of ships, and is really the outlier on this list. Beyond that, the Firebird is the largest in size, while being very close in size to the Gladiator, and the Shrike being about as long but more narrow and less tall. Being more narrow and more tall. The Gladiator has the best HP at 25,000, which you would expect from an anvil ship, but honestly, the Firebird is pretty close at 23,000 HP. The Shrike is a step down at 18,000, with the Fury being a measly 6,000. Speed-wise, the Firebird is the fastest on this list by far, with an SCM speed at 240 meters per second and a max speed at 1,400 meters per second. The next closest would be the Fury MX at 230 and 1250, but it's really important to remember that the Fury is a snub craft and lacks that quantum drive, and often those ships are offset with higher speeds, knowing that they will have limitations on other ships to haul you around, so they kind of balance things out a little bit because you're operating in one limited area. The Shrike is third fastest at 225 and 1200, with the Gladiator bringing up the rear expectedly at 220 and 1150. The Shrike and the Fury are pretty evenly matched in extremely high agility, with the Firebird being quite a bit behind in third place and predictably the low maneuverability Gladiator at the bottom of the list. For range with quantum and fuel, the Firebird is what I would call the best balanced. With Gladiator having the most hydrogen and the Shrike having the most quantum, the Firebird scores second in both of those qualities. So overall, aside from weaponry, the Firebird wins in speed, is second in durability and range, and is the largest of the group, meaning a larger profile to be hit and least transportable. When it gets down to weapons, as in the guns, the Fury has none, purely a missile boat, so it's going to be out of the discussion here. The Firebird and the Gladiator have the best pilot-controlled weapons at 2 size 3, while the Shrike only has 2 size 2 weapons. The Gladiator does have a trick up its sleeve with a turret, which, since the capacitor changes in turret weapons being more usable, if you have a person that will fly with you or eventually hire an NPC or blade those weapons, it's a huge damage multiplier because you get those additional 2 size 3 weapons. Where missile boats really matter, though, is obviously the missiles. From a number perspective, the Firebird matches the Gladiator with the least, being 12. But the story matters because the size matters with the missiles, among other things. Firebird has 12 size 3s. Shrike has 24 size 3s. Fury has 8 size 1s and 16 size 2s. And the Gladiator has 8 size 2s and 4 size 5s. which is actually a small torpedo. I'm again excluding the Fury here since the size scale is just below what we have on the others. But when you look at them, there are some nuances when it comes to these ships that might make you feel the most appealing based on your preferences. Seeing the Shrike with double the missiles that the Firebird has of the same size, that's a little bit of a hard pill to swallow. You do get to fire off 6 at once with the Firebird, which means a higher alpha strike that is capable, but that's not also going to be super sustainable with only 2 salvos if you take that approach. The Shrike maxes out at 4 per salvo, meaning that you have 6 salvos of 4 size 3 missiles, which is far more impressive in my mind. The Gladiator's size 2 missiles with only 8 is less impressive, but the size 5 torpedoes do mean a lot more against bigger ships with more HP to their name. I personally feel like the Gladiator is better suited towards engagements where you're going to have a capital ship involved so you can contribute against the main attack in a more meaningful way. The Firebird is probably better for the well-coordinated sneak attack. I again feel like the Gladiator is more like the Fury, where it's not really the best match to compare to, so if we look really closely at the Firebird versus the Shrike, that's the one that I see as the real comp here. In between those two, the Firebird wins with better HP, speed, hydrogen capacity, and non-missile weaponry. On the flip side, the Shrike wins with agility, better quantum fuel, and missiles. If you're buying one of these ships purely based on missile capability, then the Shrike is my preferred choice. But if you're looking for higher alpha damage with the speed to put you into positions to do that, and better durability to support that run, like against a turreted ship or a ground target with air support, then the Firebird is a better bet and a more well-rounded option. The choice is really close, so maybe it just comes down to your preference on alien versus human design. So should you buy the Sabre Firebird? If you're a missile-dependent pilot but still willing to dogfight and be able to support other options versus just relying on those missiles, then I think it's worth a look to see which of the attributes between the Shrike and the Firebird are going to fit you a little bit better. I think for most people, a more traditional fighter with more weaponry is going to be a better bet, both from a sustainability, lack of dependence on the patch behavior, and the ability to stay out fighting for longer. But the Firebird is certainly not without value. The price isn't that compelling, but it's not bad either compared to other standards that we've seen on ships of this capability. So hopefully that gives you a better idea on what the Firebird is and if there's value that provides you with the temptation to add one to your fleet. If you have questions, please get them into the comments. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Stay tuned for a lot more coming soon. Have yourselves a wonderful day and take care.